Guys, good morning. All right. See, I have one more use case to understand like how we can integrate the external system so as uh, we could perform something called as an inbound integrations. So the idea behind the inbound integration is like you would be you would be sending a request from the Salesforce to an external system, and upon receiving that request, the external system would transfer you a few of the records that we would be going to receive inside the Salesforce. So particularly when Salesforce is receiving something from an external system, this sort of integration is called as an inbound integration. Now, as an example of this inbound integration, we already have taken one program wherein we have integrated an application called as Postal Pin Code API, which is actually an open source API. And we built up the front end as well as the back end part for that. The front end, I have used Visual Force programming, wherein we have created one user experience where we have created one user interface by using Visual Force programming. And from that user interface, we would be transferring the value of pin code, that pin code along with the complete endpoint URL and the method name and few more parameters, that everything has been sent as a request to Postal Pin Code API. And in response to that, that application would have written us the complete details of that postal pin code, which we have displayed on a Visual Force page in the form of a table. Now, that was one thing. That was the very first example wherein you have extensively used the JSON parser class. The JSON parser class. Now, in the same way, let's try to understand this with one more example, and we have probably three of them. So after this, there would be one more example by which. So three is, I guess, it's more than enough to understand and to make your practice onto this. I will try to find out a few more open source APIs if they are available. If I got the time, I'll definitely make a small research onto this. And if possible, I could also construct a program for this. That's not exactly a promise. That's I would try to do this. Otherwise, in my opinion, because see, when we were being taught this, they have just taken one program. But I have extended my search and I have explored other two examples as well. So this is the second one, and I have one more example. With these all three examples, we would try to understand, and it's really enough to understand like how to perform an inbound integration from an external third-party systems. In this case, I would be using an application called as Weather Map API. Let me first of all try to give you an idea what is a weather map application, how exactly it runs. So as you can see, there is an application called as Open Weather Map, or it's a website, if you can say. Now, you first of all would require, in this case particularly for your postal pin code, you does not require to make a login over there. But to get the details of this particular application, I'll show you. It actually gives you the details, the weather details of a particular city, of a particular province, of a particular region. Now, how we are going to integrate this all? You first of all would require to create your login into this. You have to create your login into this, right? So how you are going to do that? There is one sign in button over here, and you know how to create your logins, right? So I have already registered my email address with them. But if you are a new person, you obviously would require to, if you are not registered with them, so you have to go with this link. create an account, and that's mandatory. So when you would be trying this example, you'll have to create your own account in this. Because I already have it, I would rather just make my logins over here. Now see, let me just try to show you what exactly we are trying to integrate. And these interfaces, the changes after, after every 2 to 3 months, whenever I come over here, I see something new. All right, services, I guess I'll have to go over here. Current and forecast APIs, historical data, weather maps. Let me go with this one, current and forecast APIs, current weather data. All right, if I would go with this API doc, latitude, current. See, this is what, you will have to study it a little. You cannot directly go with the integration. You'll have to go with these links, geocoding API, built-in API request by city name. I would rather go with the C. There are, two options. You can either enter a zip code, city ID. City ID would particularly use for US only, because in India, we don't have anything like this. But at least we have something like this. So I would go with this link, built-in API request by the city name. So if you wanted like, if you wanted to get the details according to the city name, so you have to make a click over there, and this is something what we know is something called as endpoint URL. So there are three options wherein you can evaluate how you wanted this to be get used. So with this URL, as you can see, I'll have to enter the name of city and API key. I'm going to tell you what is an API key and how to get it. In this option, in the second, you'll have to enter the city name and country code. The third one, city name, state code, and country code. So the simplest one over here is this one, wherein you just would require to enter the city name. And let me try to show you how exactly the response looks like to be. So I'm trying to get my API key over here. So for this, I will have to go with, see, if you go with your name, you can see there is something called as my API keys. This is my API key. There are two of them, default and this one, which I have set. So I will take this one. I just have copied that. I'll paste it out over here, somewhere around over here. I'll just paste it out. And now see, let me show you like how exactly, how exactly you can get the data, how exactly the response looks like to be. So I would be calling this, I'm pasting it out over here. And here, if I'll have to enter, you have to remove the brackets. And here you have to enter the city name and then your API. So my API is this one, which I just have, I would just copy my API key. When you create your login into this, you would be going to get your own API key. And right, so this is that response, you would going to receive. I just copy this and paste it out over here. Let me, let me just show you how does it looks like to be. Longitude value, latitude value, and then weather, the information of weather goes from here. Before that, it was longitude and latitude. ID, I'm not sure what it is. Maybe the city ID. Okay. Description, haze, done. What are this all? We can ignore few of them if you don't wanted to display those responses. You can ignore some of them, right? It's up to us how much portion of the response we wanted to pass. It's always up to us how much portion of the response in which we are interested. So let me let me arrange this response in a proper manner, and then we would going to decide how much portion of this response we are interested. So that rest other things, we can ignore, and we can build up a logic like in a way that we could simply ignore the other entities and we could just grab those things out of this response which we feel is more intelligent. Let me arrange this and make it more readable. If you can see, it gives the complete information of that particular city. I mean, the information related to what is going to be the temperature and every entity. Let me just, I can just arrange them because that is important to understand the response. Gives the information of country as well, sunrise time, sunset time, time zone as well. It is giving the response as from time zone, and then ID, name, coordinates. All right, so these all are the information. See, this is that complete set of information, right? How much portion of this we wanted to display? That depends on us. You wanted to pass the complete response, or out of this complete response, a particular portion you wanted to display. So that we can decide. So this program with the second example, and the first was postal pin code. I have just passed every element out of that, right? So the response which we get, I mean, after giving that endpoint URL, so we have passed that complete response. That was one example. Now, what you are going to learn in this example would be like, there would be two things actually, apart from that passing, what we already have completed. But apart from that passing, apart from how would you pass the response and all, that portion already has been completed, and we have taken a lot many examples for that. So obviously, that is something which we which we know. So with this example, I can show you like there would be two things new for you. The first is like how we can use the custom settings. What is a custom setting particularly, and how we can use that efficiently, particularly for storing the crucial entities which we don't want it to get exposed. What is the purpose of custom setting? That is also I'm going to have a small discussion on that. Then second thing would be, if this is a response, if you are integrating with an external system and if that external system is giving a huge response to you, I mean a lengthy response, what is the portion of information what you feel is more intelligent towards your requirement, and how to grab only that particular things, right? So as you can see, it is giving a lot many information, the value of longitude and latitude, then the weather information particular is being placed over here, and it is showing us like temperature. What is the temperature? That's in, I guess that's in degree Kelvin, because this this cannot be in degree Celsius. 299 degrees Celsius is I mean, you cannot live over here on the surface of the earth. If this is going to be the temperature, you cannot live. So I guess this is in degree Kelvin. We can convert this. We can apply a formula and then convert this into degree Celsius or what. Anyways, so then how does it feels like? Temperature, minimum, maximum, pressure, humidity, or what do you want it? Visibility values as well. So we can simply decide out of this response how much portion we are going to pick up and how much portion we are going to ignore of that. So that is another thing you would be going to learn, and then how we are going to use the custom settings and all. All right. So let's start with the program. So there are a few prerequisites for this. Like you always require to collect the endpoint URL, and that endpoint URL you can simply collect it from here as well, right? You can simply copy and paste it out, right? You can simply copy and paste it out like this, right? Where you would require to enter the city name. I have entered Nagpur, and then API key. So my API key is this one. So this is that endpoint URL, which I first of all would have to collect it. Then you also know that we would require to add that this endpoint URL will have to add it inside the remote site setting, right? Unless and until we don't add the remote site setting, we cannot perform any inbound integration. That's an important part of authentication. So as in step number one, or maybe the step number two, if the collection of everything is your step number one, then the method type, yeah, also you can collect it from here. You can go with that, and You can go and you can scroll, and somewhere around, you will going to find which particular method. And see the idea. I mean, they are giving like in the parameter what you would be get. So they are trying to explain you this as well. Ki lang means this one lang, and this zip means that one. Right? So what we can do over here is like, we can simply scroll it, and somewhere around we're going to find what method we would be, what method we would be going to use. So you'll have to go through with the document. I know it's get, but I just wanted to locate it somewhere. I try to find it out. See, no, it's not. All right, so it's not being given. So let me explain you in that case. So if you would see that, I mean, in the document, nowhere it has been mentioned that you have to use the get method. So now let me tell you about that. We are going to learn this in the web service. I mean, just after this, the next topic and the last topic would be the web services. So there, I was about to tell you this whole thing, but let me now try to describe you. There are a few forms of methods. There are a few forms of method: get, post, put, pass, and delete. Get particularly is used to retrieve the information, to get the information, as the name itself indicates, right? If you wanted to get something from someone, if there is a standalone application you are integrating, and the intention, your intention is to get something from that. Like in the previous, in this, prior to this, we have taken one example where we would be supplying that postal pin code value, but then the whole set of response, that application was returning us that response which we wanted to get. It is very simple to understand, right? I will talk about rest other thing in later on, but let's now understand, if this application nowhere it has been written that which method has to be used, you can apply your own common sense over here, right? You can apply your common sense, and if you know the, I mean, how many methods are there: get method, post method, put method, pass method, and delete method. So you can decide, if you have that understanding, what does every method is used for, their functionalities. So even though if that has not been written anywhere inside in this document, by using our own common sense and intelligence, we can decide which method has to be used in this case: get or post or put or patch or delete. So we would going to talk about every other method later on when we jump to the next topic, web services. But for your information, just let me try to make you understand about get. So if our intention is to get something, we are performing an inbound integration where Salesforce is intended to become a receiver. Salesforce is set up like a receiver. It would receive something from an external third-party system. So the method is always going to be get. In an inbound integration, it always have to be get. It always have to be get, right? So this is like, you have to understand the endpoint URL and the method name is everything. Once you have documented this whole thing, the next step would be like, you'll have to go and add that endpoint URL inside in your remote site setting. That is very much essential, right? So you have to go to the remote site setting, and there you have to add this. What I'm going to do would be let me copy this, and let's see how much portion of this. I guess up to I guess openweathermap.org. You just copy the whole thing. That setting itself would decide kitna portion of that URL is going to be added into remote site setting. So you can from here quick find also you can find it out, but I usually skip that part because मैं चाहता हूँ कि आप लोग navigation सीखो, because lightning में तो हम यही करते हैं. So you can go to the security controls, and if you scroll it somewhere around the security control, you're going to find the remote site setting over here. It's here. Remote site settings. So we have created one postal pin code API. Now let me go with this new remote site button, and I shall be creating one more. For remote site setting, I can give the name as Open Weather Map API, and the URL which I can give over is this. Now I have given the complete URL which I have just copied from that document. When I would save this, it would give me the error. So I will try up to over this. Let's see. Up to over this I would be trying. So it has saved. So even though it has been saved, you can see that it has just taken the domain portion and rest every other thing has been skipped, right? So that's why I was trying to say you whether अपना रिमोट साइट सेटिंग में इट वुड जस्ट ऐड अप टू द डोमेन नेम, उसके बाद के जो पाथ होते हैं डोमेन नेम के बाद में जो भी पाथ होते हैं दैट यू विल हैव टू टेक केयर ऑफ एवरीथिंग इनसाइड एंड पॉइंट यूआरएल। एंड पॉइंट यूआरएल बनाते वक्त आपने इस चीज का ध्यान रखना पड़ता है। तो दिस इज नाउ एन ऑथेंटिकेटेड एप्लीकेशन बिकॉज द इट हैज बीन एडेड इनटू रिमोट साइट सेटिंग। मतलब नाउ दिस वेबसाइट फ्रॉम दिस वेबसाइट दिस पर्टिकुलर ऑर्गेनाइजेशन इज अलाउड टू रिसीव सर्टन पैरामीटर्स। If this website, Open Weather Map organization, if this application is sending something to this organization has set up, has authenticated, has authorized Open Weather Map that you can send something to me and I'll able to receive that, right? So usually they ask you this in the interview, and you have to clearly, you'll have to be very clear about your thoughts. When they would say, if I would ask you a question in interview, how would you perform the authentication in integrations? How would you set up the authentication for third-party system in the during if you are performing an integration? Listen this question, and listen this. You can write it down. How would you authenticate a third-party system when you are doing an integration? कोई थर्ड पार्टी सिस्टम है जिसके साथ आप इंटीग्रेट कर रहे हो, तो हाउ यू आर गोइंग टू परफॉर्म दैट ऑथराइजेशंस ऑथेंटिकेशंस एंड ऑल। तो इसमें आपको आंसर करना है दो तरीके से। देयर आर टू सेपरेट वेज टू डू दैट, डिपेंड्स वेदर वी आर डूइंग एन इनबाउंड इंटीग्रेशन और एन आउटबाउंड इंटीग्रेशन। So if you are doing an inbound integration, when the Salesforce is set up to receive something from that external system, now to authorize that input data, we have to add that endpoint inside remote site setting. ये inbound है जो हम अभी कर रहे हैं। आउटबाउंड में क्या होगा, इसको थोड़ी देर के लिए सस्पेंस रखते हैं, और आउटबाउंड जब आएगा, जब हम नेक्स्ट इसका जो आखिरी टॉपिक है, आई एम गोइंग टू स्टार्ट आफ्टर दिस, वुड बी द वेब सर्विसेज, व्हेन यू वुड क्रिएट दोस वेब सर्विसेज दैट आर गोइंग टू एक्सपोज द Salesforce डेटा टू आउटर वर्ल्ड। तो उस वक्त कैसे करते हैं, विल गोइंग टू अंडरस्टैंड दैट टाइप, राइट? तो इसके दो आंसर्स होते हैं, दैट अथराइजेशन पार्ट, दैट ऑथेंटिकेशन पार्ट। How would you allow someone to come inside Salesforce and get something? Or maybe if someone is sending some to you and you wanted to receive that data and display it inside the Salesforce, store it inside the Salesforce, how we are going to perform that? So in case of inbound integration, the authentication is always done by using remote site settings. Without this, even though if you have written the classes, it would still not perform any sort of, it would not allow you to perform any sort of any sort of integration. And then in the last example, if you remember, we got that error. हमको वो error मिला था. When I was trying to hit that API, तो मुझे error मिला था, है ना? So that was an example कि if you won't set up remote site setting, you are not going to get the responses. याद रखें. So this is a very important step, right? This is a very important step. Now I'm introducing something new to you guys. Instead of exposing these endpoint URLs and application keys and everything, because see, what I just have did is like, over here, if you can see, if I would send this URL, so you can see in this URL, there's one drawback. Is like, I have exposed my API key, isn't it? I have exposed my API key. Now you even, if you would copy and paste this, you are also going to access that. That means it is something like, let's consider this is a crucial entity. This was supposed to be a secret thing, but now because I have included that in the URL, so indirectly, but I have exposed this entity to the outer world. अब अगर ये कोई पासवर्ड होता, मान के चलो, ठीक है, अगर ये मेरा कोई पासवर्ड होता, और अगर मैं इस तरह से इसको बना के देता हूं, तो नाउ दिस यूआरएल हैज बीन एक्सपोज टू एवरीबॉडी एल्स अराउंड, तो हर कोई जान चुका होता कि यार ये इनका पासवर्ड है। तो अभी ये इतनी बड़ी चीज नहीं है, बट आई एम जस्ट ट्राइंग टू मेक यू इमेजिन कि अगर हम कोई ऐसी एंटिटी है जो हम यूआरएल में डालना भी जरूरी है, बट एट द सेम टाइम वी वांटेड टू कीप दैट सीक्रेट, वी डोंट वांटेड टू एक्सपोज दिस वैल्यू टू द आउटर वर्ल्ड, हाउ यू आर गोइंग टू डू दैट? क्योंकि अगर मैं इस तरह से इसको दे रहा हूँ, है ना, एपीआई की या सिटी नेम जो कुछ भी है, if I'm giving those parameters which are actually required inside endpoint URL, आप इसके बिना इसको hit नहीं कर पाओगे. Without giving the name of city, without entering the API key, you cannot hit this URL properly. You're not going to get the response out of this. But at the same time, you don't want it to expose this. अभी यहाँ अगर आप देखें तो ये clearly expose हो रहा है ना? This is clearly getting exposed. आप भी ये URL copy करके paste करके अगर चाहोगे तो आपको भी response आ जाएगा. And you simply you don't would require to create your login. आप ये API की जो है वो hit कर सकते हो, कोई प्रॉब्लम, मुझे भी कोई इशू नहीं है. इम्पोर्टेंट वो नहीं, इम्पोर्टेंट ये है कि हम कैसे छुपाएं जब हम कुछ इस तरह से, अगर कोई हमारे पास में कोई एंटिटी आती है which we simply don't wanted to expose it to the outer world. तो is there any way inside Salesforce? Yes, of course है. तो वो बड़ी एक इम्पोर्टेंट चीज आज हम सीखने वाले हैं, and that is using of custom settings and custom labels कैसे क्रिएट करना. So what I'm going to do would be, I would be creating something called as a custom setting या custom labels I would be creating. ठीक है. तो चलो देखते हैं कि क्या है ये, what is this thing is. So I would go to, I don't know what is the navigation of that. Setup, build and create. Inside create, you would have something called as a custom labels. Right? We have something called as a custom labels. Custom label is different and custom setting is different, first of all. Custom label अलग होता है, custom settings अलग होती है. In this particular case, I'm not using custom settings. I will take another example, or maybe you can go and Google this out. What is the use of custom settings? Please write it down. Please write it down. What is the use of custom setting and how? What is the difference between a custom setting and a custom metadata? Please write it down. This is something they usually ask this in the interview as well, right? What is a custom setting? What is the use of custom setting? And what is the difference between custom setting and custom metadata? So please go and write it down. Please try to find out those differences. They would ask you this in the interview, right? I would be creating something called as a custom label over here. So a custom label I would be creating, and then short description. Let me just try to copy everything from here. So I'm giving weather map API endpoint. So this complete URL actually, so short description I have given, name it has already taken. Value is I am giving up to this, I'm giving up to this. If you would see this URL, इसके बाद में equals to के बाद में city name और API की है ना, तो यहाँ से लेके मैं even URL भी जो है हमारा which we don't wanted to expose even that as well. तो हम लोग उसको भी expose नहीं करना चाहते, ठीक है. URL और सारी चीजें वी आर नॉट एक्सपोजिंग एवरीथिंग, यहाँ पे हम कुछ भी एक्सपोज नहीं कर रहे हैं. तो व्हाट वी आर डूइंग इज लाइक कि हमने एक कस्टम लेबल क्रिएट किया. कस्टम लेबल इज जस्ट लाइक अ निकनेम, आप भी समझ सकते हो, ठीक है. एवरी वन ऑफ अस इज हैविंग अ निकनेम, पता ही होगा सभी का. तो इंस्टेड ऑफ गिविंग दिस कंप्लीट एंड पॉइंट URL, I would be calling this with a nickname, weather map API endpoint. That would represent this, right? I'll be saving this, और मुझे यहाँ से ये copy कर लेना, because this is something which you would going to require to write down in the program. So weather map API endpoint, ठीक है. तो inside in your program, wherever, ध्यान से सुनिए, inside in your program wherever you would require this URL, आपको जहां कहीं भी इस URL की जरूरत है, that you can take with a statement, and you have to write down this apex statement, label dot the name of the label. What is the name of the label? Weather map API endpoint URL, ये वाला, ठीक है. So अब इससे क्या हुआ कि this entity has been hidden, ये entity hide हो गई. Instead of giving the complete URL and hard coding that inside in the program, which we usually don't do, ठीक है. So I have created something called as a custom label. Inside in this label, I have stored that endpoint URL. And in my program, I would be referring this with system.label.your, the name which has been given to you. Similarly, I would be creating one more for those keys and what, this also is something which I wanted to be get hide, from the external world. So I would be going back. I'd be going back and I would be, one has been created. Another one I am creating with a name called weather map application, and this is that value. This is that value which I would be storing it on site over here. saving this out. And wherever in my program, when I wanted to refer this key, what I'm going to do would be what I'm going to do weather map application key weather map. I would be using system.label.weather map. Okay. So this is an additional step which we have introduced with this program, but this is something, we used to maintain this whole process in real time like this only. ठीक है. तो कभी भी endpoint URLs या फिर कोई other parameters है, तो we usually don't expose that directly. Rather, what we used to do, we used to create either custom setting or either a custom label for that. And I wanted you to find out what is the difference between a custom setting and a custom metadata. Now, rest of this, abhi aap Visual Force page banaoge and everything. So let me create, I'll just copy and paste it out. So what I'm going to do, जो हमारी Apex, जो हमारी technique है, हमारी जो technique है, उसके through that, what to say, URL technique, I would be creating one Visual Force page for this. So Apex and / your page name, it would initially give you this error. There is no such page with this name. This is something Visual Force page error. But at the same time, it has given us a link over here. Okay, page to nahi hai, but if you wanted to create, you can click onto this. So as soon as I would click that, it would be creating one page for me. It would be creating one page for me, and I would just remove that default code and I'll paste it out with this. I would be pasting it out with this. So. And now as and when I'll try to save it, यहाँ फिर से एक error आएगा controller. So it would initially try to find out this controller. ये controller को Apex class को ढूंढने की कोशिश करेगा. Tab style position, I'll just remove this. I'm not giving any tab style over here. So it would try to find out an Apex class with this name, which obviously it would not going to find, और हमको ये error देगा यहाँ पे. But at the same time, it would give us a link to create that class. So now we already have that discussion. What does it means by with sharing class and a without sharing class, right? So I would go with the default, and the default is without sharing, right? So I would be creating this class, and let me copy that. I would be explaining you, don't worry. I would be explaining you everything out of this context. Now why I'm copying this? Let me try to code it with my own. It would take time, but let's do this, let's do this. So I would go and try to find out this class inside in the developer console. Let me code this. Close it out, everything, and find out a class with this name. So this is that class. Let's code it over. Yes. See, what we are intended to do over here is like, from this block, we would be sending the value, You'll have to concentrate up to over here, right? We would be sending the value of city, enter the city name. That means there is going to be, one text box would be created where you would going to enter the city name. यहाँ पर it would be like this. यहाँ लिखा रहेगा enter the city name, और यहाँ पर एक text box रहेगा, ठीक है? Then there would be a button, एक submit या कुछ show weather details नाम से एक button रहेगा यहाँ पे, and as and when you would click, तो नीचे में टेबल नहीं लिया है मैंने, टेबल नहीं लिया है, तो जैसे प्रेशर वैल्यू इस तरह से डिस्प्ले होगा ये, एंड इट वुड बी डिस्प्ले इन 2 कॉलम्स. यहाँ देख सकते हैं आप 2 कॉलम है. तो इस तरह का कुछ ये इंटरफेस है. अभी इसमें एरर्स हैं, जब मैं इसको सेव करूंगा आगे चल के, जब ये एरर फ्री होगा तो आपको इंटरफेस भी नजर आ जाएगा. तो फ्रंट एंड से हम क्या मंगवा रहे हैं? फ्रंट एंड से वी आर आस्किंग फॉर द सिटी नेम, ठीक है, जिसको एक वेरिएबल हम डिफाइन करेंगे अभी प्रोग्राम में सिटी नेम नाम से, एंड वी वुड बी स्टोरिंग दैट इनसाइड दिस वेरिएबल, ठीक है. चलो, सो let's start coding that. How many times we have time? So this is a class which inside in this class, first of all, let me create few of the variables over here. Public string city name, and because see I wanted to use them inside Visual Force programming, so all of those variables are the collections which you wanted to interact with the Visual Force page. Compulsorily you'll have to, you have to introduce the getters and setters over there. Now, one more string variable I would be using to store the response. That's a common thing. मैंने इसके पहले भी बताया था आपको कि एक वेरिएबल हम लोग हमेशा डिफाइन करके रख देते हैं, अ, ताकि हम सिस्टम डॉट डीबग से या किसी और मेथड से फ्रंट एंड पे बुला के हम देख पाए कि हमारा एपीआई प्रॉपरली हिट हुआ है या नहीं। तो एक एडिशनल वेरिएबल हमेशा रखा जाता है ताकि हम ये एपीआई को हिट करके एक इनिशियल एक प्राइमरी चेक कर लें, मे बी विथ सिस्टम डॉट डीबग, या फिर उसकी वैल्यू फ्रंट एंड में ट्रांसफर करके आप ये देख लें कि आपका एपीआई प्रॉपरली हिट हो रहा है या नहीं। उसके बाद फिर हम पार्सिंग वगैरह जो भी एल्गोरिथम लिखना है उस पर जाएं, लेकिन पहले हमको एक इनिशियली एक प्राइमरी चेक कर लेना चाहिए। सो ऐसा ही एक सिमिलर वेरिएबल मैंने इसके पहले जब पिछला प्रोग्राम बनाया था वहां भी आपको दिखाया था। सिस्टम डॉट डीबग से हमने ट्रैक कर लिया कि हमारी एपीआई प्रॉपरली हिट हो रही है या नहीं ना, वो स्टेप नंबर 1। तो ये जो है ये एक टेम्पररी वेरिएबल है जिसका पर्पस सिर्फ इतना रहेगा आगे चल के कि मैं रिस्पॉन्स जो रिसीव कर रहा हूँ मैं इस वेरिएबल में स्टोर कर दूंगा, और फिर सिस्टम डॉट डीबग या फिर किसी और टेक्निक से फिर मैं इसको डिस्प्ले करके ये चेक करूंगा कि भाई एपीआई जो है वो प्रॉपरली हिट हो रही है या नहीं। ठीक है, आइए आगे बढ़ते हैं। नाउ आपको जितने यू विल हैव टू define the variables, like which variables variables जिसका वैल्यू you wanted to display, on the visual force page to show their values on visual force page। जितना भी आप डिस्प्ले करना चाहते हैं दैट आई वांटेड टू। सो सी आई आउट ऑफ दिस होल रिस्पांस, ये सारा रिस्पांस जो मिल रहा है, नाउ इज द टाइम टू डिसाइड कि हाउ मच पोर्शन ऑफ दैट वी वांटेड टू डिस्प्ले। यहाँ से आप ये भी सीख लेंगे कि आप कैसे स्किप कर सकते हैं कुछ। सो ये तो पूरा सेक्शन अपन डिस्प्ले कर ही देंगे, है ना। इसमें है टेम्प का वैल्यू, टेम्परेचर का वैल्यू, एंड इट ऑल्सो हैव द वैल्यू फील्स लाइक, है ना, प्रेशर, टेम्प, मैक्सिमम, ह्यूमिडिटी, ये सारा ठीक है। सो दीज आर समथिंग, एक, दो, तीन, चार, पाँच, छः। सो आई कैन डिस्प्ले दैट minimum, maximum. If this is minimum, maximum, this can be the average temperature. Anyways, so ये इतना out of this whole complete response, we are more interested in this portion only. हम सिर्फ इसी में interested हैं। Rest every other thing we would be skipping that. तो हम कैसे skip करते हैं वो देख लेते हैं। आप don't worry, मैं आपको बताता हूँ, अभी वही टेक्निक बताता हूँ मैं। चलिए पहले तो मैं इनके लिए वेरिएबल्स डिफाइन करता हूँ। पहले यहाँ पे जितनी भी चीजें उसके लिए मैं वेरिएबल डिफाइन कर सकता हूँ। पब्लिक, इसके पहले हमने एक दूसरी क्लास ली थी, वहां पे वेरिएबल डिफाइन किए थे, वो एक टेक्निक थी। रैपर क्लास दूसरी टेक्निक है। तीसरा ये वाला देख लो आप, इसमें यू कैन सिंपली डिफाइन द वेरिएबल्स इनसाइड इन द क्लास एज वेल। ठीक है, एवरेज टेम्परेचर, एंड एवरी टाइम सी व्हेनेवर यू डिफाइन समथिंग, every time, because ये variables they are going to interact with the visual force page, it's very much compulsory, it's very much compulsory that you you set them as get and setter, feels like। यहाँ पे क्या एरर दे रहा है, check। after feels like it is temperature minimum, temperature maximum, so it would be temperature minimum, temperature, pressure, for pressure it is humidity, so string humidity, All right, let me now try to save this and let's see why this error is coming. Oh, gone. Okay, so whatever whatever the response, उसमें से आपको जितना portion चाहिए, so according to that you have created similar variables, right? Average time feels like, minimum temperature, maximum pressures, and humidity. So all these variables I have created. Now, let me go and create one method, right? Let me go and create one method. So, if you would see this page, अभी यहाँ पेज मैंने पहले ही बना लिया है, तो एक बटन है जिसे शो वेदर डिटेल्स नाम का, जिसकी एक्शन प्रॉपर्टी में मैंने एक यहाँ पे एक मेथड का नाम डाल रखा है कि जब आप वो बटन को हिट करते हो तो एज एन एक्शन इट्स गोइंग टू कॉल दिस। ये दोनों सेम होना चाहिए, राइट? तो द मेथड विच आई वुड बी क्रिएटिंग, पब्लिक void, it shouldn't be a static method, तो ये मेथड का नाम जो है वो सेम होना चाहिए। अगर आप यहाँ कुछ और नाम दे रहे हैं तो दैट यू विल हैव टू कॉपी एंड पेस्ट इट अराउंड हियर। ठीक है, ये थोड़ा सा ख्याल रखें कि आफ्टर हिटिंग दिस बटन, जब आप ये बटन प्रेस करते हो तो ये चीजें आनी चाहिए। आई गेस नाउ इफ आई वुड सेव दिस तो ये एरर नहीं देगा। गेट वेदर डिटेल्स, अच्छा मैंने सेव नहीं किया यार। लेट्स कम बैक एंड लेट्स ट्राई टू सेव इट ओवर हियर। pressure that values, let me try to show you. And by the way, this is the way to insert comments. This is the way to insert comments inside in your Visual Force program. Yes, that is for single line. Single line, it's okay. नहीं, फिर ये काम नहीं करेगा। ठीक है, कोई बात नहीं। Let's complete with this, बाद में आते हैं वहां पर। चलो, so I have created a method, this method will going to do everything, जहाँ से हम रिस्पॉन्स कलेक्ट करेंगे और फिर उसको टेम्परेली एक वेरिएबल में भी स्टोर करके फिर हम सिस्टम डॉट डीबग या फ्रंट एंड में उसको डिस्प्ले करते हैं और फिर हम आगे का जो प्रोसीजर है वो आगे करेंगे। ऑलराइट, सो here you would first of all, here you would have to the prepare the inputs, right? आपको यहाँ पे जो भी required inputs हैं that you'll have to prepare it over here. तो सबसे पहले हमको चाहिए होता है end point URL। तो string एंड पॉइंट यूआरएल एक वेरिएबल डिफाइन कर रहा हूं मैं। अच्छा, अब एंड पॉइंट यूआरएल देखो, आई एम नॉट गोइंग टू हार्ड कोड दिस, इसके पहले हमने हार्ड कोड किया था बट अब नहीं करेंगे। अब इसलिए नहीं करेंगे क्योंकि वी हैव क्रिएटेड अ कस्टम लेबल फॉर दैट, राइट? अभी हमने जस्ट एक कस्टम लेबल बनाया है उसके लिए, एंड पॉइंट यूआरएल के लिए। बट ये जो हमारा एंड पॉइंट यूआरएल है इसके लिए हमने कस्टम लेबल बनाया है, इसका नाम है वेदर, ये वाला। तो वी वांटेड टू गेट दिस फ्रॉम हियर, हम हार्ड कोड नहीं कर रहे हैं प्रोग्राम। So to get that, I would be using system dot system dot label। ठीक है, सिस्टम डॉट लेबल डॉट, यहाँ पे वो नाम आता है, मतलब आ जाता है बट अभी नहीं आ रहा तो मैं मैनुअली करूंगा उसको। सो सिस्टम डॉट लेबल वेदर मैप एंड पॉइंट। अच्छा, अब एक चीज देखो यहाँ पे, ये आपका जो आपने कस्टम लेबल बनाया ये यहाँ तक ही है। ठीक है, ये यहाँ तक ही है, राइट? लेट मी जस्ट कॉपी, और वो डिफरेंस क्या मैं समझाना चाहता हूँ उस पर आता हूँ। सो आपने जो एंड पॉइंट यूआरएल अभी जितना स्टोर हुआ है वो बेसिकली यहाँ तक, ये देख लो यहाँ तक ही है। ठीक है, लेकिन जब हम इसको हिट करेंगे, एक्चुअली व्हेन वी वुड हिट दैट, तो हमारा कंप्लीट यूआरएल तो ये होना चाहिए। ठीक है, हमारा कंप्लीट यूआरएल ये होना चाहिए। अभी आपने जो कस्टम लेबल क्रिएट किया है, बाय द वे, ठीक है, बाय द वे, वो इस तरह से यहाँ तक है। तो अब इसमें कुछ चीजें और ऐड करनी है आपको टू मेक दिस कंप्लीट एंड पॉइंट यूआरएल। अभी इतना पोर्शन जो है यहाँ से, ये आपको यहाँ पर अगर मैं सिस्टम डॉट लेबल दे रहा हूँ तो इसमें मुझे एंड पॉइंट, ये जो वेरिएबल है, इसमें कहाँ तक स्टोर हुआ है, इसमें हमारा स्टोर हुआ है यहाँ तक ही। लेकिन सिर्फ इतना देने से काम नहीं बनेगा। आप जानते हैं कि जो कंप्लीट इसका जो यूआरएल उसमें सिटी नेम और एपीआई की एंड एवरीथिंग आना चाहिए। तो अब देखिए मैं इसमें आगे में और ऐड करता हूँ प्लस, इसको और ऐड करता हूँ इसमें प्लस। प्लस क्या चाहिए मुझे यहाँ पे? प्लस मुझे सिटी नेम चाहिए, मतलब प्लस द नेम ऑफ द सिटी। तो सिटी नेम हमें कहाँ से, एक मिनट, एक इक्वल्स टू भी है क्या यहाँ पे? इक्वल्स टू आई गेस ऑलरेडी है, इक्वल्स टू, यहाँ ठीक है। इसके बाद में हमें सिटी नेम चाहिए। सिटी नेम हमें कहाँ से मिल रहा है ना, वेयर वी आर गेटिंग दिस। तो आप अगर अपने प्रोग्राम को देखें तो एक वेरिएबल हमने डिफाइन कर रखा है सिटी नेम, विच वुड रिसीविंग दैट। तो मैं इस वेरिएबल की वैल्यू यहाँ लिख देता हूँ। हो गया, बस इतना है क्या? नहीं। आफ्टर सिटी नेम आफ्टर सिटी नेम यू हैव समथिंग लाइक दिस, एंड एपीआई ऐप आईडी, राइट। तो दिस ये आपको हार्ड कोड करना पड़ेगा। दिस वी कैन डू द हार्ड कोड। लोग तो इसके लिए भी कस्टम सेटिंग, अपना कस्टम लेबल्स क्रिएट कर लेते हैं, पूरा ही हाइड कर लिया करते हैं। तो ऐसा भी होता है, बट मैं ऐसा नहीं करूंगा। इतना पोर्शन जो है एपीआई की जो है उसके लिए हमने फिर से कस्टम सेटिंग, कस्टम लेबल बना रखा है। इतना पोर्शन जो है, ठीक है, इतना पोर्शन मैं यहाँ पे हार्ड कोड करता हूँ। तो प्लस फिर से, और मुझे अपेंड करना है, स्ट्रिंग है इसलिए इस तरह से एंड एपीआई की इक्वल्स टू, इसके बाद फिर से प्लस। तो प्लस ऑपरेटर हियर इट इज यूजिंग एज अ कॉन्कैटिनेशन ऑपरेटर, राइट। अब इसके बाद क्या चाहिए तुमको? तो इसके बाद में चाहिए हमें एपीआई की। इसके बाद क्या चाहिए हमें? एपीआई की। अब एपीआई की के लिए फिर से हमने कस्टम लेबल बना रखा है, ये है एपीआई की, उसके लिए हमने कस्टम लेबल बना रखा है। सो दिस वी आर अगेन गोइंग टू गेट विथ लाइक सिस्टम डॉट लेबल्स, जो हमारा टेक्निक होता है ना, उसी के थ्रू हम लोग वी आर गोइंग टू गेट दिस। सो सिस्टम डॉट लेबल्स आज इंटेलिजेंट काम नहीं करता है। सिस्टम डॉट लेबल डॉट, आई वुड जस्ट कॉपी एंड पेस्ट द नेम ऑफ दिस, ये वाला नाम मैं वहां पे पेस्ट कर देता हूँ। सो नाउ this is your complete endpoint URL. ठीक है, so this is your complete endpoint URL. Let's try to save up to this. ठीक है, ये हमारा complete endpoint URL तैयार हो गया है, जिसमें से आपने इतना पोर्शन कस्टम लेबल से किया, फिर उसके बाद में वेरिएबल सिटी नेम की वैल्यू वेरिएबल में थी वहां से ले लिया। और जब भी आप कुछ ऐड करते हो तो आपको उसके लिए प्लस देना पड़ता है। देन जो कंप्लीट यूआरएल में एंड एपीआई आईडी ऐसा लिखा हुआ होता है यूआरएल में, तो उसके अकॉर्डिंगली मैंने इतना पोर्शन सिर्फ हार्ड कोड कर लिया। अदरवाइज आप चाहें तो इसको भी एक कस्टम लेबल में ले सकते हैं, ऐसा कुछ नहीं है। इसको भी आप कस्टम लेबल में इतना पोर्शन भी आप हाइड कर सकते हैं। उसके बाद में फिर जो की का वैल्यू। नाउ अब हमें रिक्वेस्ट सेंड करनी है, तो सेंड द रिक्वेस्ट, जो जो पैटर्न हमने इसके पहले सीखा है वही करेंगे हम यहाँ पे। तो एच टी टी पी वेदर, वेदर का डब्लू ले लेता हूँ, वेदर डब्ल्यू एस टी टी पी इक्वल्स टू न्यू एस टी टी पी। सबसे पहले विल ऑलवेज हैव टू क्रिएट द ऑब्जेक्ट ऑफ एस टी टी पी क्लास विच इज अ पेरेंट क्लास। ठीक है, पहले सबसे पहली स्टेप यही होती है। उसके बाद में स्टेप नंबर 2 होती है रिक्वेस्ट फॉर्म करना। तो रिक्वेस्ट फॉर्म करने के लिए you'll have to use the http request class जो होती है, http request जो क्लास होती है, इसका आपने वेरिएबल फॉर्म करना है। सो http request you can give any name like w request equals to new http request. Now with the help of this you would have to create the request। ठीक है, अब इसकी मदद से आप रिक्वेस्ट क्रिएट करेंगे। तो आई जस्ट कॉपी दिस नेम ऑफ ऑब्जेक्ट, नेम ऑफ ऑब्जेक्ट, ठीक है, दैट डॉट डॉट, आज क्या हो गया पता नहीं, एंड सेट एंड पॉइंट, सेट एंड पॉइंट इक्वल्स टू, आपको एंड पॉइंट जो है वो देने हैं यहाँ पे, सेट एंड पॉइंट्स दिस मेथड। तो हियर you'll have to give the end point। एंड पॉइंट के लिए मैंने ऑलरेडी एक वेरिएबल बना लिया था, सो आई जस्ट गिव द वैल्यू ओवर हियर एंड देन the next would be the next and the important is set method. These two are very important. Every time when you do this, you form the request, these two things are essential. These two things are essential. So the method is get method. Now the third one is simply optional. You can decide, you can give it, or if you don't want, you can simply skip that as well, which is set timeout. Set timeout. It's up to you. What do you want? What do you want? So I can give the value, any value this time. Let's say 10,000 I can give. और मे बी 20,000 10,000 शॉर्ट हो जाएगा, आई गेस 20,000 आई कैन गिव। ओके, लेट मी ट्राई टू सेव अप टू दिस। तो ये रिक्वेस्ट मैंने फॉर्म कर ली है। जब रिक्वेस्ट फॉर्म कर ली है, यू कैन नाउ सेंड दिस। So you can now send this request. So when you are sending that request, right? So you'll have to use the method send method, but send method belongs to HTTP class, right? So what I would be going to do over here is like, I would be using this WHTTP dot send method, right? I would be using send method. What to send? This is that request. ये request है जो हमने भेजनी है, ठीक है? When this request would be, अब जब आप you'll be sending this request, it would obviously going to generate a response. Now that response has to be collected inside in HTTP response variable, ठीक है? That response have to be collected into whether let's say response, right? You can give that name whether response, ठीक है? और W response if you want it. W response, सब W से चल रहा है तो W response, W request, W HTTP, let's say W response. Let me now save this once again. All right. So अब ये इतना पोर्शन जो है ना, पहले इसको चेक कर लेना चाहिए हमेशा। देखो, इसके पहले कि हम प्रोग्राम में आगे जाएं और हम पार्स करें, वी हैव 4 more minutes, और आपकी 8:35 पे स्टार्ट होती है। तो हमें कभी भी ना इतना पोर्शन चेक कर लेना चाहिए। तो मैं क्या करूंगा, क्विकली जो हमने एक वेरिएबल डिफाइन कर रखा है ना, एक वेरिएबल हमने डिफाइन कर रखा है, उसके अंदर दिस रिस्पॉन्स डॉट गेट बॉडी, हम वो रिस्पॉन्स जो है क्विकली हम इसके अंदर स्टोर कर लेते हैं, गेट बॉडी, राइट? वी वुड स्टोर दैट। ऑलराइट, एंड वी कैन चेक इट फ्रॉम हियर एज वेल। हम वहां से भी कॉल कर सकते हैं, लेकिन वहां से सिटी नेम वैल्यू नहीं दिया मैंने, नहीं, यहाँ से नहीं होगा। लेट मी ट्राई टू क्विकली रीलोड दिस once again. Let's see what happens. Okay, ये क्या हो? अच्छा, आई हैव नॉट स्टोर्ड दैट, सेव नहीं किया था। सेकंड, क्विकली ट्राई टू रीलोड कर दिया सेव करने के बजाय। ठीक है, and let me show this over here as well, यहाँ भी शो कर लेते हैं। Right, let's now give the city name as Nagpur, button show weather map details, and let's see हमको ये पे हिट होता है क्या, देख लो, ये इंपॉर्टेंट है। आप यहाँ से भी देख सकते हो इस तरह से, ठीक है? और एल्स व्हाट यू कैन डू इज लाइक, आपने प्रोग्राम रन किया है तो सिस्टम डॉट डीबग फाइल इसकी क्रिएट हो गई होगी। यू कैन गो टू लॉग्स एंड देयर यू कैन गो विद द रीसेंट वन, डीबग ओनली, डीबग ओनली। यहाँ क्यों नहीं आ रहा? अरे, कुछ गलत किया है क्या मैंने? सिस्टम डॉट डीबग नहीं लिखा क्या? हाँ, सिस्टम डॉट डीबग नहीं लिखा। क्विकली सेव दिस, लेट्स एग्जीक्यूट दिस वंस अगेन। इस तरह से, ठीक है? ये एक प्राइमरी चेक होता है, हमेशा याद रखो, ये एक प्राइमरी चेक होता है। इसके पहले कि आप पार्स करो, ये हमेशा करते हैं हम इंटीग्रेशन के दौरान। व्हाट वी मेक श्योर कि हमको एपीआई हिट हो रही है कि नहीं, सबसे पहले वो चेक करो। एक बार आपको रिस्पांस मिल गया है ना, आपको रिस्पांस मिल गया मतलब आपका एपीआई हिट हो रहा है, आपका इतना कोड एकदम सही है। फिर अब इसके बाद क्या करना है वो बात की चर्चा है। तो इसके बाद क्या करना है फिर, अब हम इसको कल कंटिन्यू करते हैं, कल सैटरडे बट आपकी क्लास रहेगी, और सिर्फ यही प्रोग्राम लूंगा, बचा हुआ पोर्शन तो ज्यादा कुछ नहीं है, आई गेस हाफ एन आवर वुड बी इनफ फॉर दिस। कल यही टाइम पे हम क्लास कर लेते हैं, अगर राम सर आगे पीछे नहीं करते हैं तो देख लेते हैं, और कल इस प्रोग्राम को कंटिन्यू करके फिर फिनिश करते हैं। सबसे इंपॉर्टेंट चीज देखो, ये इसलिए मैं बोलता हूँ कि एक वेरिएबल हम हमेशा डिफाइन करके रखते हैं, ताकि हम एपीआई हिट करने के बाद में उसको उसमें स्टोर करें, और उसको सिस्टम डॉट डीबग, और या फिर आपने फ्रंट एंड में कोई लॉजिक लिख रखा है तो उससे आप डिस्प्ले कर लो, और सबसे इंपॉर्टेंट ये चेक करो कि आपका एपीआई हिट हुआ है कि नहीं। पूरा कोड करके कोई फायदा नहीं है ना, अनलेस एंड अनटिल यू सी कि हमारा एपीआई हिट हो रहा है। हाँ, एक बार ये हिट हो गया है तो ठीक है, अब उसके बाद क्या करना है, रिस्पॉन्स का कितना पोर्शन अपने को रखना है, कितना पोर्शन नहीं रखना है ना, तो उस पर चर्चा करेंगे कल। चलो, आज इतने, एंड थैंक यू फॉर ज्वाइनिंग। अभी आपके पास टाइम नहीं है क्वेश्चंस के लिए, गो फॉर द नेक्स्ट क्लास।